It was supposed to be a historic day. A $200 million partnership between Carrington Global and one of China's largest tech giants was about to be signed, sealing years of effort diplomacy and countless late-night strategy calls. The entire 45th floor of the Manhattan skyscraper buzzed with anticipation. But inside the executive suite, CEO Harrison Carrington wasn't celebrating. He was panicking. "Don't tell me this now, Rebecca." He barked into the phone, pacing like a caged animal. His shoulders, usually square with power, were tense under the weight of a collapsing deal. She canceled. The interpreter, Rebecca Langley, his trusted but high-strung senior VP, was on speaker, her voice shaking. "Her kid's in emergency surgery. She said she's sorry. I've called every Mandarin translator in New York. No one is available this last minute." Harrison swore under his breath. Just outside the window, 3 luxury sedans pulled up in front of the building right on time. The Chinese delegation had arrived. If stories of unexpected triumphs inspire you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because sometimes the people we overlook hold the keys to the most powerful truths. He loosened his tie, beads of sweat forming at his temples. 20 years of empire building might unravel over a miscommunication. This wasn't a casual client lunch. It was a cross-cultural, high-stakes negotiation where every sentence mattered. And they had no one to bridge the language gap. Then, from the back of the room, a soft voice said, "Excuse me, Mr. Carrington. I speak Mandarin." Everyone turned. No one had noticed her there before Ava Mitchell, the janitor. She stood in her Navy uniform, holding a dusting rag and a small spray bottle. She looked ordinary, unremarkable, invisible the way service workers tend to be in corporate spaces. Carrington blinked, stunned. "You what I speak Mandarin," she repeated, her voice steady. "Cantonese as well, and some Taiwanese dialect." Rebecca scoffed. "Ava, this isn't the time for whatever this is. This is a multi-million-dollar international contract." Ava didn't flinch. "I majored in Oriental linguistics at Cornell. I had to drop out my senior year to take care of my mom, but I've kept up the language." Carrington's eyes narrowed. For a moment, he just looked at her not as the woman who polished the floors, but as someone new, someone useful. "Prove it," he said finally. "Say something, anything, in Mandarin." Ava straightened her posture. Then she spoke, clear, confident, fluent. The room went still. Even without understanding the words, everyone could tell it wasn't memorized. This was fluency, precision, control. "What did you just say?" he asked. "That it's an honor to meet with you today, and that we hope our cooperation is mutually beneficial." Ava replied in English. It's a standard business greeting in Chinese corporate culture. Carrington's face shifted from disbelief to dawning hope, but Rebecca wasn't buying it. "She's a janitor," she said, pulling Harrison aside. "Do you really think the Chinese will take us seriously if we seat a custodian at the head of the table?" Ava's gaze dropped briefly to the floor, but only briefly. Because that wasn't the first time she'd heard something like that. Months ago, she had passed by the executive restroom and heard Rebecca whispering on the phone. That black girl's always lingering near the conference rooms. Creeps me out. Ava had pretended not to hear, just like she'd pretended not to see the way Rebecca tightened her lips every time she passed by. But she had remembered every word. And today, she was ready. Carrington hesitated. "Can you do this? Sit in that room and represent this company?" Ava looked him straight in the eye. "I've cleaned that boardroom for 3 years. I've listened to every strategy session you've ever had. I know how you negotiate, how you pace your talking points, when you bluff and when you double down." "Yes, I can do this." He nodded. "You have 20 minutes. Change into something professional and meet me back in the conference room." Rebecca's jaw dropped. "You're out of your mind." But Harrison was already on his way out the door, his mind racing toward possibility. Downstairs, the delegation was stepping out of their cars. Upstairs, Ava Mitchell was racing to the employee locker room, pulling out a simple black outfit she'd bought months ago just in case. She had no idea why she had held on to it so long. Maybe deep down, she knew this day would come. As she pinned her hair into a tight bun and slipped on a pair of low black heels borrowed from the receptionist, Ava didn't feel like a janitor anymore. She felt like everything was about to change. And she was ready. The glass walls of the boardroom shimmered under the morning light. 5 delegates from the Beijing-based company sat in a perfect row, immaculately dressed, their expressions unreadable. They conversed in Mandarin, exchanging quiet remarks as they waited. When the door opened, all heads turned. Ava Mitchell entered not in a uniform, but in a sleek black blouse and tailored skirt. Her poise was elegant, her bun neat, her hands holding a leather folio like she belonged there. To many in that room, she looked like a junior executive. To Rebecca Langley, she looked like a threat. Jesus, muttered Thomas Levin, the company's CFO, his coffee halfway to his lips. Is that her? Rebecca leaned toward her assistant and whispered sharply, "You can dress up a piece of coal, but it's still coal inside." Ava heard it. She didn't flinch. She had heard worse in those very halls, heard Rebecca's voice behind closed doors, mocking interns, scoffing at minority hires, and even once saying during a holiday party that diversity hires are just corporate PR. But today wasn't about resentment. It was about power. And Ava knew something they didn't, how much power silence could hold. Until it didn't, Gentleman Harrison Carrington began walking in behind Ava. "Allow me to introduce our international liaison for Asia-Pacific Affairs, Ms. Ava Mitchell." There was a pause, a beat of uncertainty. Then Mr. Lying, the delegation's leader, stood and offered a respectful bow. When Ava bowed in return and addressed him in flawless Mandarin, commending the delegation's punctuality and welcoming them with customary deference, his expression shifted from suspicion to surprise, then to admiration. The energy in the room changed. For the first 20 minutes, Ava translated with surgical precision, not just the words, but the meaning, the rhythm, the cultural subtext. When one of the Chinese executives made a subtle joke, she carried it with the right tone, earning laughter from both sides of the table. Carrington glanced at her with something approaching awe. The deal that had been moments from disaster now floated on steady currents. But it didn't last. Rebecca couldn't help herself. Halfway through a proposal discussion, she cut in with a sugar-coated tone. "Mr. Lang, I just thought you'd like to know Ava's story is actually quite inspiring. Just last year, she was cleaning these very rooms." Carrington's eyes flared. Ava stopped mid-translation. Rebecca added, flashing that venomous smile. It's so rare to see someone reinvent themselves like this. From janitor to interpreter. That's the American dream, isn't it? A silence followed that wasn't just awkward, it was deadly. Ava turned back to Mr. Liang. She translated truthfully. She had to. His brow furrowed. He exchanged looks with his team. In Chinese corporate culture, hierarchy is respected, expected. Presenting someone with a janitorial title as the lead voice in a $200 million negotiation could signal a lack of seriousness, or worse, disrespect. The next few minutes were strained. Where there had been ease now, there was doubt. Ava felt it in every glance. She had gone from professional to anomaly. That was the moment something inside her clicked. For 3 years, she had watched these rooms from the shadows. She had cleaned the fingerprints off of glass walls where backdoor deals were made. She had emptied trash bins holding shredded documents and half-formed strategies. She had seen and heard everything. And most of all, she had watched Rebecca Langley. Rebecca, who once deleted resumes from candidates with 2 ethnic names. Rebecca, who manipulated project metrics to discredit employees of color. Rebecca, who smiled like she was doing everyone a favor just by letting them exist in her space. And Ava had kept records, not for revenge, but for protection. "I'd like to clarify something," Ava said gently in Mandarin, looking straight at Mr. Liang. In our company, we value people for what they contribute, not where they come from. While I may not have always held a formal title, I've been preparing for this role longer than anyone knows. Mr. Liang nodded slowly, processing her words. The meeting wrapped with an agreement to review the documents and discuss further diplomatic code for we're not walking away yet, but we're watching closely. As the delegation filed out, Rebecca turned to Ava with a false smile and a dagger in her voice. "Well," she said, gathering her notes with a flourish, "maybe next time we'll be more transparent about our team's qualifications from the start." Ava looked at her and smiled. "Mr. Liang actually asked me to call him later," she said calmly. He had questions about why the primary negotiator in the room wasn't properly introduced. Rebecca froze. "He was confused," Ava added. "In their culture, the person who speaks the language is seen as the one in power. He assumed I was the lead." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. She didn't speak. She didn't have to, because Ava had already won the round, not with aggression, with fluency, with composure, with truth. And as she walked out of the conference room, heels clicking softly against the marble floor, Ava knew this wasn't over. This was the beginning. The boardroom was packed again the next morning. But this time it wasn't for celebration. CEO Harrison Carrington had called an emergency meeting after receiving a discreet but unmistakable message from the Chinese delegation. And they had uncovered potential contract violations, some of which might be in breach of federal international trade regulations. Rebecca Langley strutted into the room like she still owned it, her red blazer sharp as a blade, and heels clicking with the kind of confidence only a person in denial could muster. She had prepared a neat little narrative. Everything that went wrong. Blame the janitor. Well, she began addressing the senior board. "I think we all know why we're here. Yesterday's meeting was unfortunate. But as I warned, placing an unqualified employee at the negotiation table was reckless and frankly beneath this company's standards." Before Carrington could respond, the door opened. Ava Mitchell entered, wearing an immaculate gray ensemble, sleek, powerful, purposeful. She carried a slim laptop bag in one hand and a stack of folders in the other. No janitor cart, no cleaning supplies, only evidence. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said calmly, taking a seat near the projector. "I was finalizing some materials I thought the board should see." Rebecca's head snapped toward Harrison. Why is she even here? Carrington didn't look at her. The Chinese delegation specifically requested her presence. Silence fell like a blade. Ava opened her laptop and connected it to the screen at the front of the room. "Yesterday, Mr. Liang voiced concern over inconsistencies in our internal documentation, concerns that echoed what I've observed over the past 3 years. Rebecca scoffed. "She's a janitor, for God's sake. What could she possibly have observed about contract law or executive decisions?" Ava didn't flinch. She clicked. The first slide lit up the screen. An email exchange dated 7 months ago from Rebecca Langley to a potential client. The message contained confidential pricing information that could have only come from a competitor. This email, Ava said clearly, was sent to Mills Corporation and reveals trade secrets about Johnson & Cumber, our direct competitor at the time. That alone is a federal violation. Gasps echoed around the room. "No, that's out of context," Rebecca snapped. "That's not what it looks like." Click. The second slide, a spreadsheet of inflated cost projections, all tied to projects led by Black or Latino employees. The manipulated numbers had caused several of those projects to be canceled under the guise of incompetence. This wasn't a mistake, Ava continued. It was a pattern of sabotage and discrimination. Click. Audio played through the room's speaker system. Rebecca's voice, unmistakable, recorded in the executive lounge 8 months ago. "We can't let these kinds of people think they belong at the top. We have to maintain standards, image matters." Rebecca turned pale. "You bugged me," she hissed. No, Ava replied. The building's own security system recorded that. I just happened to be the one cleaning the floors when you said it out loud, like I wasn't there, like I didn't matter. Click, another audio file. This time from just 2 weeks ago, Rebecca instructing a receptionist to misplace resumes with names she deemed too urban or hard to pronounce. The room fell dead silent. A long moment passed. Then Mr. Johnson, a senior board member who had worked at Carrington Global for over 20 years, spoke up. He was one of the few black executives in the company and one of the most respected. "Rebecca," he said slowly, his voice tight, "is this true? It's not what it sounds like," she stammered. "You're letting her frame this to you violated federal compliance," Ava said firmly. "You endangered a $200 million deal. You undermined entire departments based on race and background. And you thought no one noticed." Carrington stood up. His voice was stone. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you shouldn't be terminated and reported." Rebecca looked around the room. No allies, no lifelines, only judgment. "You're making a mistake," she whispered, trembling. "She's just a resentful cleaning lady who, she Carrington cut in, is our new director of international relations." Silence. Total, crushing silence. "You're fired. Effective immediately," he added. "Your access credentials are revoked. Security will escort you to collect your things." Rebecca's world crumbled in real time. As security approached, she locked eyes with Ava one last time. "You might have won today," she hissed, "but that doesn't change what you are." Ava didn't even blink. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm exactly what I've always been, someone who watches, learns, and acts when the time is right." Rebecca was escorted out. The door clicked shut behind her. Ava turned back to the room where everyone now stared at her with a new expression. Not pity, not skepticism. Respect. 3 years ago, she was wiping down those very chairs. Now she was sitting at the table, where she belonged. 6 months later, the skyline of Manhattan stretched wide beneath Ava Mitchell's office window. The same city she used to walk through in silence, avoiding eye contact, pushing a janitor's cart, her hair pulled back, and her dignity tucked deep, now looked back at her differently. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was leading. From her corner office on the 38th floor of Carrington Global, Ava reviewed contracts printed in English Mandarin and Cantonese. The soft hum of success filled the room, phone lines ringing with international calls, her executive assistant knocking lightly to announce the arrival of another foreign delegation. "Ava, the South Korean rep's just landed," said Jennifer, the same woman who once whispered behind her back and now worked as her assistant. "They're eager to meet the woman who tripled our Asian revenue in 6 months." Ava smiled and stood smoothing the navy blazer she wore not out of obligation, but by choice. She had turned a single act of desperation into an empire of influence. Carrington Global had signed 4 new partnerships across China, Singapore, and South Korea, totaling over $400 million in expansion. What began as a rescue mission became a revolution. And Ava Mitchell was at the center of it. Even the media had taken notice. Business Week featured her on the cover, the translator who redefined international business. She stood smiling next to Chinese executives in a sleek gray suit, calm, commanding, and above all, undeniable. Her $300,000 salary had allowed her mother to get top-tier treatment for diabetes and had helped Ava quietly finish her master's degree through Columbia University's Executive Business Program. At night, she studied economic policy. In the morning, she signed international contracts. She no longer just translated deals. She wrote them, and she never forgot where she came from. 3 weeks after her promotion, Ava returned to her alma mater, Cornell University, to announce a new scholarship program in her name, the Second Chance Initiative. 20 full-ride scholarships for first-generation students who had to abandon their degrees due to family or financial emergencies. No one, she said on stage before 500 tearful students, should have to choose between caring for their loved ones and chasing their dreams. One of the attendees watching the live stream from her couch in Queens was Rebecca Langley. Gone were the designer suits and the Manhattan high-rise. After her termination and the public federal investigation into discriminatory practices, Rebecca had been fined $50,000 and blacklisted from executive positions involving federal contracts. Her face had appeared on the cover of the Wall Street Journal not as a rising star, but as an example of what corporate toxicity looks like when exposed. She had applied to over 40 companies. None had called her back. Bills stacked on the coffee table. Therapy sessions drained her savings, and the apartment she now rented had a view not of the skyline, but of a back-alley dumpster. When she saw Ava's face on that magazine cover, something broke, but strangely, it wasn't anger. It was the first flicker of regret. Back at Carrington Global, Ava stood quietly in the hallway, where she had once scrubbed glass panels and emptied trash bins. Now young analysts greeted her respectfully. Interns looked up to her. Receptionists leaned in for advice. She had become a mentor, especially to those who, like her, came from overlooked places. She took 5 junior employees from operations and quietly sponsored their development, paying for courses, giving them executive shadowing opportunities, even advocating for their promotions. "Do you know what's most fascinating about all this?" Carrington asked her during one of their private talks. Ava looked up from her contract reviews. "What you had every opportunity to destroy Rebecca personally. But you didn't. You only exposed the truth." Ava smiled. "The best revenge," she said softly, "is not to destroy someone. It's to build something so extraordinary that everything they tried to use against you becomes irrelevant." That afternoon, she received a call from her mother. "I saw your TV interview, sweetheart," her mother said with tears in her voice. "You were so composed, so strong." "I learned from the best," Ava replied. "You always told me they can try to ignore us, but they can't erase what we know or what we're capable of." At the end of that interview, the host had asked, "Do you feel any resentment toward the people who dismissed you?" Ava had thought for a moment. Then said, "Rebecca gave me the greatest gift. She showed me exactly who I never wanted to become. And in doing so, she helped me become the version of myself I was always meant to be." Back in Queens, Rebecca turned off the television slowly. Her hands trembled not with bitterness, but something dangerously close to humility. Maybe it was time to stop fighting the fall. Maybe it was time to listen, because Ava Mitchell's story wasn't just about talent. It was about vision, preparation, dignity in silence, and the relentless strength of those who've been underestimated for far too long. She didn't shout to be seen. She observed. She waited. And when the moment came, she didn't just take a seat at the table. She rewrote the rules.